Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Whick TV. Actually, you know what? It's a Whick and Tali show. It's the vibes are off. I almost did the wrong
That's
introduction.
right.
We're starting great. Gang. Welcome to another episode of The Vibes Are Off with Whick and Tali. And today, our special guest, our feature presentation, is a gentleman by the name of the Liberal Professor. Today, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things, but mostly we're going to be focusing on the state of online discourse. Is it good? Is it bad? Could it use some work? We're going to talk about it, gang. We're going to get through it. But before we do that, I want to give the mic to Mr. Professor here and introduce yourself. Tell people who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you. Go ahead.
Mr. Professor. I usually just go by LP. LP is fine, but
Fair.
Mr. Professor has a tone to it. Anyway, nice to meet everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is. I go online as a liberal professor. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about liberalism, critiques, theories, philosophies behind it, history, and why it's just one of the best political system ever conceived. Hence the name. I really like the system. I think it's great. And thank you to both Whick and Tali for having me here today. I look forward to the conversation.
Oh, I do too. You know what? You're a man after my own heart. Liberalism is great, best system. Sell us on it a little bit. I guess the first question I have for you is, when you say liberalism, what do you mean? Can you kind of introduce our audience to it, describe it, tell people what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm talking about political liberalism or liberalism, liberal democracy, I mean capital L liberalism. I'm not talking about left or right per se, but the political system. And I'm thinking about how deep you want to go, because that's a rabbit hole. But on a superficial level, liberalism is basically an idea that a government is based on a constitution, upheld by institutions that are norms and procedures that set it up. And as its fundamental principles, it has the idea of rights. It's a right-based system. And these rights can differ, but they're basically something we call fundamental rights, which kind of almost everybody agrees on. There are some variations here and there, like United States and Canada both are liberal democracies, but some rights may be different here and there. I think rights of languages might be a little bit different between the two countries. But at the core, it's about self-realization and self-actualization. We set the rules of the game. We don't tell you how to live. We don't tell you what type of life you should lead. We just set the boundaries and go nuts, basically. That's a very simplistic point, but there are problems with it. Although it is the best system we got, it is not perfect. And that's part of my channel where I tackle some of the criticism made of liberalism, which I think worth addressing. And there are problems here, even domestically within liberal discourse, when you're discussing things. United States, for example, the big one is abortion. It's always a contentious issue, and both sides can be liberal when they're discussing it from different perspectives. Right to life versus the right to autonomy, both are right of self-actualization, but they're both liberal arguments at their core. However, I find that more and more in the 21st century, we have succumbed to the allure of anti-liberal thinking and anti-liberal sentiments against a lot of right-based approaches. And I've seen you, Whick, being in the trenches here and there, fighting the good fight. So bless your heart, man.
Thank you. To get a little, to dig a little, right? And I think this will relate to the overall topic. When you say that you've seen some anti-liberal thinking, can you give us some examples of what you mean?
Yeah, so on the more, I guess you could call it professional level or academic level or what have you, I think one of the best books that kind of like encapsulates this is, I don't know, how familiar are you guys with Patrick J. Deneen by any chance?
I don't know him.
So he's a professor from Notre Dame University, political science, and he wrote a book which got a lot of acclaim, including from President Barack Obama. It's called Why Liberalism Failed. And in it, he effectively argues that liberalism has failed for a number of reasons, but the more prominent one that he puts his finger on is that we have lost a sense of a cohesive community. And this is what liberalism has done. It has made us atomized. That's a Charles Taylor quote, actually. He says more individualized. He uses more individualism. And he, interesting enough, attacks some of the founding fathers of the United States for starting this whole trend of individualization. So that's on a more professional level. On a more, I guess, since this is your domain of the online discourse, on a more online claims, there's a lot of claims that we have seen in debates come up that liberalism is not moral, liberalism is antithetical to any form of comprehensive ethics. So we have to go back to a form of political system that is give us a much more robust moral core, moral arguments, moral approach to life, and tells us how to live. And a lot of people are now moving away from some of the more important liberal tenets, like, for example, autonomy or self-actualization, and say that's not possible. We have to have like a big brother, big daddy kind of figure telling us what to live, how to live, why we should live the way we do, and give us a much more moral core, I guess you could say. Big part of it comes down to also censorship of certain ideas. Censorship in liberalism is not foreign. Liberalism does censor from time to time, but it's very, very, very selective in its censorship. So, for example, you can yell fire in a crowded theater or whatever. Those type of censorship that can be very harmful, like practical harm, and it's tried to be very loose with it. But I see this more and more coming from different sides that we should do a lot more, particularly self-censorship or censorship of others. It's been a lot more prevalent, a lot more robust arguments are coming out for it. And there's not a lot of credence given to the right-based system that we accidentally have worked so hard to build, because liberalism is really, really a historical anomaly. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have come about, but it did. Thank God it did. But whether it stays or not is really up to, well, people who want to uphold it or not. That's really comes down to it.
That makes sense. When we talk about rights, and you mentioned earlier kind of that most liberal societies agree on these certain fundamental rights. Yeah, lay them out for us.
So fundamental rights, again, this depends, but the basic ones are right to autonomy, right to self-expression, as long as you're not harming anyone. Usually the rights come down to the harm principle. You're not harming anybody and you can just like do what you want to do. Right to movement. Some places have the right to movement. You can move within the country freely. There might be change in regulation from, I guess in your case, state to state. In my case, province to province. I'm Canadian, so some rights to languages. For example, if you're in Canada, for example, the Quebec wants its rights of French language protected. So they have to have the right to write their signs in French and so on and express it. These are some of the more basic rights. Self-expression can come to like thinking for yourself and having freedom of thought. Self-expression can also materialize in the way you dress, because this is another way. For example, in some Islamic country, you're supposed to dress a certain way. We don't do that here. We say, no, you can dress however you want, as long as you within the boundaries of like acceptability. It's not like illegal, or you're not going somewhere that you're not supposed to go naked. You're okay. Yeah, those are some of the more basic rights that I can think of at the top of my head. Right to movement, free expression, autonomy, free thinking. These are probably the four basic ones. Some would say right to food and shelter and stuff falls into it. That's a little bit iffier. You can make an argument for it on the promise of being able to self-actualize. So this comes down to, not today, but maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, during the Bush administration era, the debates, if you Mitt Romney, Obama debate, Bush and Al Gore, the debates come down to both liberal in their own right, but from different perspectives. Democrats have usually been a lot more open to using government social services by saying that we got to prop up from bottom up, whereas Republicans have been a lot more top-down centric, trickle-down economy and all that. That has been a kind of both are in a way liberal in that they say the lowest member of society will benefit from the Republican perspective by trickle-down economy, when more jobs are created. From the Democrat perspective, by creating social system and social safety nets that when you're down on your luck, it'll prop you back up and allows you to go back into the workforce and realize yourself. So self-actualize in the world. And by that, I mean achieving what you can achieve with the tools you're given. So that doesn't mean everybody can become a doctor and make 600K a year tomorrow. That's not what that means.
Too bad,
it means,
right?
Too bad, I know, right? That would be great. But it means that you go out there, you're given the tools, and you do whatever you can to achieve within the bounds of the law. And usually they're based on the harm principle. You achieve what you can out of yourself and become a productive member of society. So those, I would say, are basic rights. Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense. Tali, do you have any questions on that particular line of things?
Not the rights particularly, but you already have me thinking about a few different things. I'm curious what you perceive to be the greatest threat to liberalism today, and along the lines of that book that you referenced, that I guess Obama was it like on one of his book lists that he makes or something?
No, it was at the back of the book where Obama said Patrick Denny's book is one of the most profound critique of liberalism, and therefore it needs to be addressed. So that's kind of like meeting the challenge head on, which I like. I think liberals need to meet the challenge head on more and more. I think that should be the attitude. But you mentioned
so the second part of my question there was going to be if this author's thesis is essentially it's like our atomization and lack of cohesion that is the greatest threat to liberalism, that seems like a bit of a catch-22 for lack of better terms, right? If the way that you describe liberalism is maximizing self-actualization, is the natural consequence of that, or the natural end of that, this sort of hyper-individualist atomized society? And I say all this from the perspective of someone who identifies as sort of a disaffected liberal, but desperately wants to rehabilitate the image of liberalism on the left and the right, in America at least.
So yes, Patrick J. Full disclosure, Why Liberalism Failed is also one of my favorite books about liberalism, because it does mount a lot of good critiques, and this is one of the big ones. Why is it that liberals are losing they're becoming individualized, like atoms in an ocean, completely lost? I think that is true, but at the same time, I believe that in a liberal society, you're given the option to form your own communities. And I think that's where you get your sense of communal bond. You're not supposed to be in a liberal societies, whether we like it or not, we are not as much as anybody who knows me in my personal life knows that I love the ancient Greeks. I love Athens democracy. I love the theory of them. I have taught ancient Greek. It's just amazing. It's an amazing period in history. But we just can't go back to that, where a city-state is a thing and we have only 500,000 people or 100,000 people living in it. We live in nations, and nations run by hundreds, sometimes millions of people, 100,000 depending on how big they are, but millions usually. California itself has 350 million people in it.
Well, so not quite. U.S. has about 350 million people.
U.S. has 350 million.
California has, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how much it has specifically.
A lot of
tens
people.
of
There's a lot of
millions.
Millions, right? So
finish your point. Yeah, go ahead. I have questions on this too. Go ahead.
So yeah, you can't really form a community with 350 million people. That's just not possible because of the diverging interests, diverging background, diverging cultural practices. So I think liberalism kind of answers this question by saying you're free to associate within your community and form communities of your own. The critiques that someone like Denin would launch against that is, well, those communities are meaningless, because communities gain meaning by kind of like being thrown into them in a way, in that you don't really choose your ethics, you follow your ethics. Whereas the communities you're choosing is kind of like choosing the ethics. So what's the difference between me being, and this is one of his critiques, what's the difference of being a Catholic one day and a Mormon the other? I just choose my community based on my preferences. So this is not really a robust community. My response is usually, well, it's not meant to be. It's kind of meant to give you options to see what works best for you, for your emotional fulfillment. So in that sense, this just doesn't meet.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that framing, especially on religion. Like, I understand the author's argument as you're presenting it, that we have become atomized as a society. We have lacked social cohesion in a very real way, and we have kind of gone adrift from one another. We don't see each other as fellows as we once did. I understand that argument, but I don't think liberalism is at fault for this. I think it's more the several factors. The destruction of third spaces. People have moved away from religion. People have moved away. They stopped going to church. We have a lot of third community spaces that just don't get any traction anymore because we have the internet and we have social media and we have decided to replace going and being with our fellows in meet space, if you will, with joining communities online, which are very diverse, but also you don't feel connected in the same way, right? You don't feel connected in the same way. So I think that the solution, ironically, to this problem does come through liberalism. Now, you mentioned like joining Catholicism versus Mormonism might have different issues and things like that, or it's not really a community. I would disagree as someone who grew up Mormon. I think that, yes, you can just deal with it surface level, but if you dive into any of these religious communities, not just Mormonism, but I'm sure Catholicism has some of this too, as well as Baptist and Protestantism and all the other isms.
All religions,
You can be a part and feel a real part of a community in that way. It's just a lot of people don't choose not to, and that's a problem. But yeah, to kind of wrap this up, this little rant up I'm doing right now, I think that liberalism will allow us to build better communities, but we have to learn how to deal with the technology that is coming out in a way that is much more healthy than we are.
So you're preaching to the choir, my friend.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
To also respond to the question of technology, I highly recommend anybody who's interested read the book. Patrick Deneen also has other books. I found his later works not be as good, and I have all his works, I think. His later works aren't as good. This is one of his earlier works in his second book he wrote. It's really good. I recommend reading that one. But in it, he says one of the things that he does interesting is he celebrates a lot of Mormon culture where they're kind of staying away from technology for this very reason. They're saying they have a much more coherent sense of community because technology doesn't control their lives. They use technology still, like horse chariot and all that, but they're using it for themselves, and then the technology used them in return. So like you said, you're stuck to our phones, for example. This is something that he celebrates. But I don't think you need to join like a Mormon community to be that way. You can, of course, but you can also have communities where you do things like in person and try to stay away, and you can do those stuff. And I think there are, again, I agree with you, getting out there, talking more. And this has been a critique of liberalism for a long time, and it's been coming. Like Robert Putnam is another American political theorist. I think he passed away, but he has an article which he later made into an 800-page book called Bowling Alone. And in it, he argues that people aren't going to bowling alleys anymore. Yeah. The community sense is gone because people aren't doing
I read that article.
communal
great.
things together.
Yeah.
It's a good article. Putnam is a great author as well. I highly recommend his work too. Not the book, though. It's really, really thick. But the article kind of encapsulates all of his arguments. So the claim that liberalism has atomized us is true, but I think that, like you said, it comes down to us because...
Yeah, just a quick correction. Liberalism hasn't atomized us. Liberalism has allowed technology to grow and us to choose to atomize ourselves. $5 from Gelatinous Rube to say everything's twice as expensive and the women are twice as fat. And that is his argument, I guess, for why liberalism's a problem. But go ahead.
So, you're right. And I was just going to say exactly what you said, which is liberalism gives us the tools to live according to how we see fit. If you're stuck to our phones, if you're stuck to our monitors, putting the financial constraints aside, if you're in a course or you're in a community of friends at a bar drinking or going bowling, I don't think your friends are saying stick to your phone and just look at your phone. You're doing that on your own. And at the end of the day, we are lazy creatures. Human beings are very lazy. So the way we atomize ourselves is by choosing the easy way out a lot of times. I think in gaming they call it min-maxing. We have the same. I think actually Dr. K had an interesting talk about this a while back on one of his stream. He also talked about like, oh yeah, we are min-maxing creature. All it is us being lazy, trying to reduce the amount of work we do, but get the maximum amount of output out of it. And this is why apps like Uber Eats are so popular, despite being extremely expensive.
Do you have anything on this, Tali?
I prefer your framing of that, Wick. Like I do think like the atomization, if we're talking like literally people becoming more isolated from one another and from their communities, I think it just seems like obvious that technology has played a huge role in that. Whether that's the technology that's in our hands, that's like the most obvious form that we're like choosing to pay attention to instead of going outside. But I guess I'm curious. I don't mean to like jump around, but I guess I'm curious how you address or what you think about the criticisms of liberalism that come from the right and the left. And in my view, there are like sort of like there's like a salient criticism coming from the extremes, for lack of better terms, of each side. So you have the sort of socialist and communist left who says that liberalism is essentially like spineless, you know, like it was a liberal democracy that allowed for slavery, liberalism, and is sort of like slavishly owned by the markets and financial interests and all of this. And therefore it prevents us from actually achieving the, you know, ideal flourishing of humankind and of our society. And then from the right, you have the argument that essentially liberalism allowed for woke. Liberalism, because it's not discerning, because it believes that because it's so tolerant of different intolerant ideas, it let in the boogeyman, the Marxist boogeyman and it has no defenses against it, basically. Um, I'm I'm not sympathetic at all, really, personally, to the left-wing critique. And I disagree with the right-wing critique insofar as I don't think it's like a necessarily a structural issue within liberalism, as it is like liberals, people, normies who were kind of swept by a lot of uh, dishonest framing and language and like wanting to be good people and do the right thing and yeah. So I guess how do you assess those two critiques of liberalism?
So this ties to your previous question, which, sorry, I didn't answer, the greatest challenge to liberalism, what I perceive it to be. And I honestly think the greatest challenge to liberalism is lazy liberals, interestingly enough, in that liberalism does have a rich history. So when you say the left and the right's extremes arguments and they're gaining ground, one of the reasons was that post-Cold War, for some reason, we came to understand, and I think Fukuyama talks about it in the end of history. It's like, oh yeah, everything, all ideological battles are done. Liberalism won the day. We don't really need to talk about liberalism anymore. It's the status quo. And when something becomes a status quo, people become complacent, and as such, they don't make arguments for it anymore. They just assume it's the norm. But the norm doesn't always stays the norm. And now things are changing. People are going around making more and more arguments for liberalism, which is good. I'm one of them. I'm happy that this is happening. Whick is another one. So it's good to see liberals going out there defending liberal principles once more and liberal democracy. Insofar as the left and the right arguments, there's always some truth to every argument. So when the left are saying we have a high cost of living or we need better social system, I think there's some sympathy there. When the right is saying, again, atomization is a big claim of the right. Patrick Jadini himself is on the right. The claims that sorry, you mentioned another claim by the right. I forgot. Oh, woke or tolerance. This has been a criticism of liberalism, which again goes back to you can choose your own community or ethics. Is that it's liberalism makes every ethics seems like a buffet table, and you can just go pick one yourself. So it doesn't really matter. It devalues them. Although there is some truth to both of those claims, I think both claims go very far. So if your argument on the right is, well, we need to have much more robust moral codes. Liberalism does give you that. Liberalism does give you a moral code. Like, you cannot, one of the biggest moral code of liberalism is you can't really understand why the laws are important unless you put yourself in the other person's shoe, which is an ethical claim. Every liberal should be able to see the other side of the argument. Otherwise, you're not really a liberal, you're just an ideologue. And to do that, you need to have some sort of moral cohesion, at least superficially, not robust, but again, one of my favorite liberal philosophers, John Rawls, calls comprehensive. You don't need a comprehensive moral code, but you need a loose, sympathetic moral code where you can sympathize and empathize with others to see their side of the coin, I guess, and give value to what they value. So on the right, you can make that critique, but that doesn't mean just because there are some things that are quote unquote woke, which I am not sympathetic to the term because it's become a catch-all term, and everything that the right doesn't like is kind of woke. But there are certain critiques you can make of relativistic approach, which many have made of liberals' moral principles, and you can ask for a much more robust liberal moral code. On the left, the communists and the socialists, I have no sympathy for communism or socialism as a political ideology. As a liberal, I am a pro-liberal. But I think there are some arguments there to be made about emancipation, about more equality of wealth, I guess you could say, having a much more, you can translate into more robust social safety nets, for example. They can be incorporated into liberalism to make it easier for people, like the super chatter of your said, Whick, things are expensive.
So and women are fat, but yes.
That part we're going to leave out for now. I don't think communists talk about that. But
well, they won't be fat under communism. That's true, because they won't be able to eat. But go ahead, yes.
Have you guys ever heard of Tocqueville, Alexander Tocqueville, by any chance?
That name doesn't ring a bell.
Not familiar, but...
He was a French diplomat who came to the United States and wrote a book called Democracy in America. And he said in it, Americans have a choice to make, either equality or excellence, I think. And he says, I hope they choose freedom or equality. And he said, I hope they choose equality because a society of slaves are also equal. And that kind of goes back to, you can live based on necessities all the time, but everybody's going to be in the war situation. So there is some degree of inequality in liberalism. But I think the left pushback on what that should be and to what extent that can be mitigated, I think it's good to listen to. I just don't like the ideas that both sides represent, is that, oh, here are some critiques, let's throw out the baby with the bathwater. Liberalism sucks because you're atomized.
Yeah.
Or we should have like an autocracy or communist or whatever.
Just real quick, $5 from Cameraman 502 to say, or has technology just inflamed the problems of atomization that liberalism causes? Liberals highlight rights but not duties, which build communities. And to address that, and also to address a point that you made earlier, I don't mean to interrupt you so much, but you're making a lot of things that I want to respond to, right? Like it's there's a lot of topics here. There's a lot of meat to eat, to chew on.
And we're all hungry.
Yes.
Hungry.
Yes.
Real hungry.
I think that you are absolutely right when you pointed out that liberals have gotten lazy. That is absolutely true. We have failed liberalism in that we have failed and stopped advocating for it. It has become a slur. People on the left and the right call you a liberal and say, I'm not a liberal, I'm a progressive, or I'm not a liberal, I'm a centrist, or the people have run away from the term itself because it has been given such a bad rap. And I think we need to stop running from the term and stop apologizing because not everything is perfect, right? To Cameraman's point, to the super chatter, liberals highlight rights but not duties, which build communities. The duty you have as a liberal should be to defend the rights of others, those individual fundamental rights of speech, of property, of association, of movement. And you can go down the list, right? And you can disagree on how to implement those things, and that's fine. We're always going to have discussions on that. But what we need to do is stop saying, well, things are a problem and it's liberalism's fault. No, The faults we have are because we've strayed from liberalism and because we've stopped advocating for it. And I think that one of the mistakes that liberals often make that you also brought up is, as you said, to kind of flatten the different ethics that are out there. Like, as you said, I think you called it a buffet table where people could just pick and choose and it's all the same. That's not true. While I can advocate for the rights of communists to go out and try to spread their ideology or whatever, I think it is our duty to say, yeah, they can say that, but they're fucking wrong and fucking stupid, and this is why. And this is why communism doesn't work. And those righties can advocate. They can certainly go out and advocate for Christian nationalism or whatever, but we have to point out that, no, that doesn't work. That's stupid, and that is a less good ethic system to go out, and this is why. And you're correct of lazy liberals being the biggest threat because no one wants to make those arguments because those arguments are hard. We have failed. We have failed in our duty to stand up and say, hey, no, we are liberals. We're proud. We are hard R liberals, I like to call ourselves that. And this is why liberalism is the best. That's my thoughts. What do you think, Tali? And then we'll get back to our guest here.
I like where you're going with that, and I agree. But maybe to synthesize that with the super chat and with something that Kay said in the chat, he makes a super chatter. I'm sorry, I don't remember what his name was. Makes a point that is salient, that is coming a lot from the right, from the sort of Christian nationalist types, and/or the other kind of new right fragmented groups, is this idea that liberalism and liberals and people on the left focus on the idea of rights with no attention paid to duties and responsibilities. And so I think you kind of address part of that, Whick. Like, liberals have a duty to defend liberalism and not to become complacent. And Kay touched on that sort of people who have not had to fight for our society, which is all of us in the modern day, basically, maybe with the exception of like service members, just think that this is like a natural event. And LP, as you pointed out, it's like maybe the greatest accident of all time. It wasn't supposed to happen. It's almost by luck that we end up in this place, but so many people take it for granted. But I do think something that really does stick with people, that's an effective messaging, even if that's all it is this idea that we care so much about every little special minority group having all of their rights affirmed in very flowery language, but we don't talk about duties to the state, duties to the nation, duties to your society, and then even duties to your community on a more micro level. And I think that is a critique that needs to be contended
one
with.
of the just to piggyback on that real quick, one of the things that people often mistake about liberalism is that it lets anyone do anything, and that's just not true. There are very strict boundaries within liberalism that we have to remind people exist, right? Like, there's a cameraman guy was like, oh, I'm a cannibal, you have to defend my right to be a cannibal. No, we don't. That doesn't fall under the purview of liberalism because you're going around and you're harming other people. You're violating their rights. And we do not allow that under liberalism. Liberalism is more restrictive in certain ways than a lot of people will think, but it allows people to live the most free they possibly can in any other system. And I would argue that it gives them the best opportunity to be healthy, wealthy, wise, right? And it answers a question. Have you read it's a recent Substack that's come out. I don't know if you read it, Mr. LP, but it's called The Argument. Have you heard of that or checked it out?
No, I have not.
That
sounds like a cool name, though.
Yeah, I suggest you do, because its whole purpose of existence is to make the argument for liberalism. And it's fairly new. I've only read one or two articles out of it, but the first article out of it, if they keep that quality, I think it's going to be an amazing work. And basically they pose the liberalism as this, that it answers the question, how do we live with each other? It acknowledges that there's always going to be differences sometimes very extreme differences of opinion, extreme differences of ideology, extreme differences of ethics. But the liberal frameworks allows us, unlike any other framework, to live with each other without devolving into violence and death and destruction. But I suggest you read it. But I want to pass the ball back to you, LP. We've given you a lot of meat now, so go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat. I wrote some of that. Duty, let's start with that. So to some extent, there is some truth to that claim, but I like the messaging that both of you put on it, which is duty to liberalism. So when people talk about duty, they effectively mean, because this was the case pre-Enlightenment, we didn't talk about rights, because when you talk about rights, you mean, what can the government do for you? You have rights, the government guarantees those rights. That's what that means. When you talk about duties, about what can I do for the government? That is, what's my obligations to
John
it?
F. Kennedy. Yeah, let's right. Ask not what the government can do for you. Ask what you can do.
What you can do.
Well, the country, but
So,
it's different. Anyway, go
the
ahead.
Country. Sorry, not the government. That would be much lamer.
That's different. But go ahead.
Yes.
But the fact that we are a right-based societies in general across the Western world doesn't mean that there are no duties left. And that also doesn't mean, so when people also hear about, equality and rights, they think, so all rights are equally valid. That is not the case. So you don't have the right to be cannibal, for example. That's a big one. And this comes back to the difference my grandma used to say, is that there's a difference between an open mind and an empty one. And people will say, you can accept anything and everything except only liberalism. They're arguing that, liberals are empty-minded. They have no principles. But we have an open mind. We hear the opposition. That doesn't mean we accept it. And that's the big one. And we have to push back on some of the crazy claims that are being made, not just online, but in other. Now it's even in government being made, which is absurd. But anyway, effective messaging, that's really important. And this has been something that many liberals have failed at. Again, we have become complacent. Again, if you guys want to see some of the best, this is why I love John Rawls. John Rawls was so cool, so awesome, which is not the way people usually describe Rawls. But Rawls was writing about liberalism, and his book is literally called Political Liberalism and Theory of Justice, and it's all about what is liberalism, which is my favorite topic. And in it, he's effectively arguing why liberalism is better than the alternatives, in those cases being communism. And why is it better than that? And the argument he makes is a theory called the veil of ignorance. I don't know if you guys are familiar with veil of ignorance, but
that you won't know,
position.
The way I've heard it described, and you can tell me if I'm wrong because I'm not a philosopher, right? Is that you don't know where you will be in society. Like, so when you design the society or build a society, you should do it with the veil of ignorance, as if you don't know if you're going to be a prince or a pauper, a king or a slave, right? And to design society as such that no matter where you fit in, it will work for you. Yes. Is that correct, or am I wrong? Or?
Yes, that is correct. You don't know, basically, that's the veil of ignorance. You're behind the veil. You don't know who you are. You don't know your background. You don't know what you will be in the future. You know nothing about yourself. You're just an empty blob walking around like in Lilo and Stitch. But now you have to come up together with a bunch of other people who also don't know anything about themselves. They're empty blobs, to create a system. Given that, you will choose the system that benefits the most people possible. And that's where liberalism is. He says liberalism, given the option, 10 out of 10 times, reasonable people will choose liberalism, because liberalism gives option to as many people as rationally possible. And the key term is, and this is where this goes back to the empty mind versus an open mind claim, is that he says reasonable people would agree with liberalism. Now you can say, this is a catch-22, so unreasonable people wouldn't agree with liberalism. And Rawls was like, yeah, they wouldn't, because if you're, for example, arguing for autocracy, a Christian national state, what if you turn out to be a Muslim? Would you choose it? What if you turn out to be a Jew or an atheist? Would you choose it? No, because in a Christian state, in a Christian, autocratic state, you will not have as many rights as you would in a liberal society. But if you're a Christian, you will choose liberalism. And you might even choose the other option, the Christian nationalists, but you will also choose liberalism. And when we amalgamate all these conceptions of backgrounds, whether you may be a woman, a man, any other gender, or any sort of background, you will always choose liberalism, because the chances of you having your self-actualization hampered is minimum compared to any other political system. So again, you can say, what if the critique of this. This is not perfect. Of course, nothing ever is. The critique here is there's a lot of assumptions baked into the claim of reason. That is true, and Rawls is not shy about that. But he says, as long as you can sympathize and empathize with the opposition, you would be in a reasonable position. And this comes down to, even in a liberal society, you have to some extent, be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And this is where the veil of ignorance comes in. You might not be a Christian, but you can put yourself in the shoe of a Christian.
To bring this to the topic at hand, like liberalism's great, right? But we do want to talk a little bit about the state of discourse. I think that right there is something that we are lacking in our discourse.
Yeah. You hit a nerve. Well, we are both lacking and overflowing. This is going to be what I'm about to say is a criticism. Oh, okay. What goes for both sides, the left and the right, is that we have completely given up on having any sympathy or understanding for the other side's argument. Taken a step further, there's this negative polarization where if the other side says something, I need to take the opposite position, or I need to double down in the opposite position, lest I come across as being sympathetic to the evil people on, across from me. So that's a problem that is, I think, pervasive on the left and the right. That principle seems to be completely lacking. And then on the left, I would say that principle is overflowing, maybe in inappropriate ways, right? So there seems to be, there's endless sympathy. I'll make my own partisan statement. There seems to be endless sympathy for jihadists and really extreme cultures that would not tolerate them. And then very limited sympathy for right of center, neoconservative foreign policy considerations.
Well, that's
one example.
Yeah, that's not a sympathy problem. That's more of a lens of analysis problem that the left, I'm not talking liberal here, I'm talking the far left, right? They view the world from the oppressor-oppressed dynamic, and that's an artifact of that. They see Muslims
which is
and jihadists as oppressed, and they need to fix that, right? And they see you and those like you and me, frankly, as oppressors, and we deserve no sympathy, right? So is it a sympathy problem? I don't know if it is, because it's a lack of sympathy for
suicidal,
one. Right.
Exactly, which is the point I was trying to make. I do think there's a lack of sympathy, and then what has been dubbed suicidal empathy on the other hand. So there seems to be a lot of charity given to certain worldviews and positions, and like you said, that position they take from person's various marginalized labels that they wear, but then a real lack of charity and sympathy for fellow countrymen who might disagree more marginally with them.
Okay. It's one of those things where you're right, sort of, but not. I think you take it, and this is where we disagree, Tali. I think you take it to directions that you're painting with far too broad a brush. I agree that there are people who have suicidal empathy towards groups who will do them harm. That absolutely exists. But the problem is they have that because they have no empathy or sympathy for the people who they view as wrong. And they are willing to do literally anything, and they don't care what is done to the people they view as wrong. And I think that we are...
It's connected.
To bring it to the state of discourse, right, and to get LP's opinion on here, I would, in my opinion, diagnose the state of discourse. That's the problem. We have decided, and this speaks to the atomization thing as well. We've decided that everyone around us who doesn't agree with us 100% is the enemy, and they must be defeated. And I think that this is a very anti-liberal view, and it's a very dangerous view. And I would posit that it is a view that is being purposefully amplified by very bad actors, both in this country and outside of this country. What are your thoughts?
So, that's a lot to take in.
It is. Sorry.
No. I'm actually... Sorry if you see things moving, I'm typing at the same time, just so I don't lose track of the points. Sure. So I would say I might be a little bit more extreme than even you, Whick, and I would say there is no sympathy altogether in empathy in modern discourse. So I know what Tali's talking about. Tali's talking about, well, a lot of people on the left have this almost zealots-like approach to certain issues that affect certain people, and they're willing to even forego their own well-being at the expense of that. But I would say that's not because they're sympathetic to their cause, and this goes to my problem with modern discourse, is that a lot of I will not. So let's separate this two things too, because there's a lot to unpack.
I'm sorry. We
No. This is good.
Yeah.
This is good. I love this. I personally love this. I hope your viewers also love this. But we have two.
Give me money,
approaches.
viewers. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
You should subscribe to Whick. There are, and I'm drawing a lot from Habermas here, another German theorist who talked about democracy and liberalism, and he has a theory of discourse as well. There are two different types of discourse when we're talking. There's discourse and then there's rhetoric. Or we can call it dialectic and rhetoric. And basically, the idea of rhetoric is you're trying to convince people, whereas the idea of discourse is that you're trying to understand people. Those are very different types of approaches to a conversation. And if you're sympathetic or empathetic, you would expect there to be a lot of discourses. There's a lot of okay, why do you do this? So to best demonstrate this, let's do something let's do a bit of a role play. And this
I'm
is
the
very
paladin.
common.
I'll be the paladin. You can be the wizard.
You can be the paladin. It's not as fun as that,
so
unfortunately. It's not as fun as that, unfortunately. But let's say that you and I meet each other outside. Let's say we are friends. You haven't met each other in like 2 weeks, and then you meet me outside of a coffee shop, and you just see me. And let's go from there. Let's say you just see me, and you come by to say hello. Go ahead.
What's up? Haven't seen you in a while. How's it hopping?
Hey Whick, I'm having a rough time, man. My grandpa just passed away last week, and it sucks.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do?
Nah, it's all good. We chat later, okay? Go.
Okay, you sure? Fair enough.
Yeah,
I'm always
yeah.
here for you, buddy. See ya.
See ya. This is a very common experience a lot of people have, and some they meet and say, "Hey, can I do anything for you? Hey, do you want to talk about it?" Stuff like that. So this is kind of using rationality, or what Habermas calls, for example, strategic action or communicative strategic action. And it's basically about you trying to make me feel better.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to do. And you do it through either, in this case, it was kind of like bargaining. It's like, hey, I'll listen to you if you feel better. That's kind of you bargaining with me. Let's reverse the role and approach it from the other angle, what he calls communicative action. And this is much more sympathetic, or not sympathetic necessarily, but it kind of points out what I mean when I say discourse rather than rhetoric. Go ahead. You be the one that is sad. I'll see you. I'll come to you and I'll go, hey, Whick, how's it going? Been a while, man.
It's I've been better. My grandfather passed away a couple days ago, and it's really tore me up, man. It sucks.
Oh shit, man, that sucks. Tell me about him.
Oh, he was a great man. He was a bastion. He served in Vietnam, right? He served in the military. He was a good guy. Always there for me. It sucks. It sucks because my real grandfather died when I was like 8, so I don't know very well, right? But you know what I mean? Like, yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But let's back up from the situation. But you see the difference between those two approaches, right?
Yes.
One, I'm taking communicative action, which is I'm trying to understand what your underlying rationality is for feeling sad. What's your relation? I'm trying to inquire and trying to bring things to the surface. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm not trying to say, hey, feel better or be better. I'm just trying to say, hey, what's going on? What's happening with you? And trying to understand you. Whereas in the other one, you're actively trying to do something. You're trying to get something out of me. So when we're talking politics, most of the conversation we have are based on that strategic approach, which is, hey, let me convince you. We use rationality and reason trying to understand something. Now, how does this relate to sympathy or empathy? Both need some sort of sympathy and empathy, but most of the time, in order to be able to engage discursively with someone, there needs to be a degree of competency between you guys. There needs to be a common foundation there for either of these things to work. If there isn't one, then you just can't sympathize with each other. So let's bring it to politics a little bit here. And when you're talking politically, and I want to be strategic, let's say I want to have a conversation about, let's say, immigration. Okay. And I'm going to say this is a big topic right now. Everybody's out there in all different countries protesting, talking about it. Here I'm saying, okay, let's talk about immigration. I want to talk about temporary worker visas and student work visas. And I want to reduce the number of hours people who work for international students back to 20 hours in Canada, for example. That would be my policy proposal.
Okay.
So I look to my left, and I go, what's your ideas on this? The person on the left tells me, you're just trying to enforce hegemonic colonial perspectives. Don't you know that there is a genocide going on in Palestine and you're not taking this seriously? And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, that's a serious issue, but that's not a topic. That's not what we're talking about right now. Let me talk to the guy on my right. Okay, you're facts and reason. You're always about rationality over sentiments and feelings. Let me talk to you. What do you think the policy? You probably disagree with me on the 20%. You might want to reduce it to 10% or something. You think we can negotiate there? The guy on the right looks at me, smirks, and goes, don't you find it interesting that there's a lot of violence in countries like India and Pakistan? I'm just saying, isn't that interesting? And you're just going, yeah, that's, I guess, interesting. What does that have to do with the policy we're talking about? These are serious issues for sure, but you're left like a Looney Tune cartoon looking at the camera going, I don't know what to do. And this is the state of discourse, in that there is no competency here to engage in any kind of discourse, because people just treat serious subject in such an unserious way. And to be able to treat things seriously, you need a degree of sympathy to put enough effort into the topic to come up with some understanding of it. So this is why I say people don't have sympathy or empathy, because they're not treating the subject matter seriously. They're just there to say slogans or just say random things that appeal. It's all theatrics. It's theatrics without the context.
Let's say, yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. Look, on both intersections, one of the problems with dealing with the left is you can't have a conversation without talking about Gaza. You can't. It always comes up. It never won't come up. It will always be thrust into the conversation, whether you like it or not. The same on the right when it comes to like race issues and things like that, right? It just is inserted because people, in my opinion, why they do this is they want to. Okay, let me start over. The more you repeat something, and the louder you repeat it, eventually people begin to just accept it, or at least most of it, right? So if every time you turn on the news, they're talking about something's happening in Gaza, there's being people killed in Gaza, everything's going wrong in Gaza, the Israeli government is doing a genocide in Gaza, regardless of the facts that they present and the veracity of the facts they present, there's so many people saying it so often that you begin, well, there must be some truth to it, right? And you kind of internalize it a little bit. And that is very, very effective. It's an effective tactic. And so you see people on all sides of the political aisle just do this. They don't have to engage with any argument. They don't have to engage with any facts-based anything. All they have to do is repeat their mantra over and over again. And if they do it enough and loud enough and often enough, people will begin to internalize and accept it. And so when you gave that kind of role play, as you say, where you're turning to your left and your right when you're talking about immigration, I think that perfectly encapsulates the problem. Is these people are just repeating talking points that they may or may not even believe, but they heard it, and this is the message, and they won't engage because they have their message, and they're not here to have discourse. They're here to preach.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my opinion.
Oh, sorry. You want to say something, Tali?
No, sorry. You go ahead. I'll jump in after.
I agree. It's all talking points and it's all posturing. But what's even more interesting to me, a lot of things are interesting to me, but this is one of the things that's interesting to me is that neither side really cares about this issue. And but some of them are really with crazy zeal and fervor, debate it and argue for it and talk about it. But then you push beyond the surface a little bit beyond the surface, there is nothing there. There's like zero legwork. And this is what I mean. One of the biggest problem in liberalism is laziness, is that it's not just liberals being lazy, even the opposition is kind of doesn't care. And we kind of memeified everything. I have actually a video on this topic talking about how memes are ruining politics in general, because everything has become a meme. But these are serious issues. Immigration, for example, can be a serious issue and is a serious issue that needs to be talked about in a very serious manner. You need to come up with your facts, you need to come up with the numbers, you need to come up with some argument. But people who say slogans, they're not really engaging. They're just blobs there talking and repeating points without any sort of and this is why I say they'd have no empathy or sympathy, because if they did, they would actually read up on these topics. They would do some legwork on it. When you care about something, you put effort into it. If you just have talking points, you don't care about it. And it's sad because liberalism shouldn't lose to these lazy arguments. But unfortunately, liberalism is in the back foot right now. So that would be my problem with a lot of discourse happening today, is that a lot of issues are serious. They feel serious. People feel strongly about it, but they don't treat it seriously. War between Israel and Palestine is a serious issue. It's not a joke. People are dying. The violence happening in Pakistan or India, those are serious issues. But although they feel serious, they're not treated seriously, which is frustrating. They're just treated as memes. And when you try to push a little bit further, sometimes people even, I remember this exact conversation I had with somebody. We were talking about I don't know if you guys remember, because it seems like an ages ago, even it was a couple of months ago, but when Trump administration got rid of a lot of flights, people who work in the, what was it called? Flight something? Why is the name skipping me? People work in airports, air traffic controllers.
Okay.
And he got rid of, because of the woke, and Elon Musk went in with Doge and started firing people. And then a lot of planes crashed. And then I was talking to someone about this, and I said, well, this is a serious issue. People are dying in these plane crashes, and this is becoming a very big problem, even for people who are not American but want to travel to the United States for job or whatever. If they can't trust the air traffic controller, how are they going to go there? It's a problem. And he said, well, it's a woke problem. This is why I don't like the whole woke argument. I said, well, but they fired everybody that was supposed to be woke, but these crashes happen. And then his next response to me was, when the aliens did it. Okay, I can't engage in a serious conversation on this topic. If you're just bringing a meme out and saying, oh, aliens probably did it. I said, okay, I check out at that point, because you checked out. And this comes back to another issue, is that you need serious interlocutors when you're talking about political issues. And there isn't any online right now, at least. In private spheres and public spheres, you can still get them here and there. Although they're becoming a rarity.
What makes someone a serious, sorry to interrupt, but when you say serious interlocutor, what makes someone, in your opinion, a serious interlocutor on a topic?
Basically, somebody who engages with the points being brought up. So if, for example, we're talking about air traffic control again, let's say I say, well, a lot of woke people got fired, so this shouldn't happen. I go, well, yeah, a lot of them did, but maybe there was still a couple left. I say, well, how do you justify that? Now, you see, we have a back and forth now. Even though I disagree with your point, I don't think your point is correct, there's a back and forth. There's a serious engagement with what I'm saying, rather than saying, oh, it was aliens. Good example of this. I think every university class should watch this clip of Charlie Kirk in Oxford debate. A good example of a bad interlocutor is Charlie Kirk with, I forgot her name, but that lady who was debating him at Oxford. Every point she brought up, he would go back to a talking point. He was not engaging with her at all. That's a bad interlocutor. That's not somebody who's engaging with what you're saying, countering it or laying out a position. That's somebody who's empty and just there to dance a little bit and get some money.
He's there to farm clips. You understand that, right? He's there to farm clips. He doesn't care about the conversation. He cares, can he get a 15 to 30 second clip that he can post online to say, look at Charlie Kirk own the libs in this discourse and how he used facts and logic to destroy her argument, even though her argument won't be shown or anything in the clip, right?
Yeah. And that's part of the problem, is that everything
Yeah.
is clips, right? It's empty. The whole hour debate was just a bunch of clip farming. I'm like, what about the substance? So these are serious issues again. But Charlie Kirk is a good example of someone who's not treating a serious issue seriously. Why? This is Oxford. You're supposed to be engaging. But anyway, sorry, Tali, you wanted to go after me. My apologies.
Sorry. No, I don't even know where exactly to jump in on this point. I guess, like, do you have any prescriptions? Like, how do we get people to engage, take these things more seriously, and be, good faith interlocutors? And I guess, like, do you see, like, there's kind of like three sides here as we're posing it. There's sort of like the left, the right, and the liberals, which I know, like, liberalism doesn't necessarily represent the center or anything like that. But if there's enemies to the left and right of liberalism, do you have any prescriptions for how we improve the discourse? Because I really like that distinction that you made between discourse and rhetoric. And I think that's something that I have definitely experienced personally, not to make it all about me, but I'll go ahead and do that, is, I was having these like struggle sessions after my vote for Trump in the 2024 election. And I think the way you describe it, it just clicked to me that I was looking to engage in discourse, maybe emotional discourse, like maybe not, maybe to sort of steel man my opponents. Like maybe they didn't think that I was being rational. There could be good reasons why they didn't want to go down the line of discourse. But what actually ended up happening in many conversations was just rhetoric. Was like, okay, but here's how can I convince you that you did the wrong thing by voting for him? Or how can I get you to agree in this conversation that you'll line up with us and vote again with us in the future? And I understand that from a pragmatic level. Like, I don't know that there's an issue with that type of approach, but it doesn't address on the human level of like sympathizing with someone's argument or their feelings or their position. And I do think that's a big problem. And I think maybe it was all sort of a farce, but the right at least presented as if they were doing that leading up to the 2024 election. They were not in power, and they presented themselves as the space where you could come and talk and you don't have to agree with everything, but we'll engage you. And I think since taking power, they've shown that was not a large priority for them. But that's something that I think the left fails on, even sort of like liberals fail on, is engaging in discourse and not just rhetoric.
So I wish I could take credit for that. That's mostly Habermas. But I would say that is true. I would say that the right had a really good marketing campaign to say, hey, we have a large tent, but the large tent was actually very exclusive to Trump administration's policy proposals. There weren't much policy proposals as much as talking points. And if you deviate from Trump's point, you would be raked across the coals. So they were very good at messaging in that regard, that, hey, we are an open tent, even though they weren't. The left has a similar issue, for sure. My prescriptions. So one of the things that happens in this problem of comprehensive, like foundational approach, is that at the end of the day, we need to have some sort of common, I guess, cultural understanding when we are talking to each other. So when you're talking, what you say is valid, what you say, if it's to be validated, is to be perceived as valid, it needs to be subscribed to some sort of background ideas that we consider to measure validity. To give an example, this is complex, but it's not that difficult when you put it into practice, which is, let's say I say women should have the right to wear t-shirts, for example, let's say something very basic. And someone says, well, no, I don't think women should have that right because my religious text told me not to. And then we're just looking at each other going, what does your religious text have to do with my argument? My argument is not based on your religious text. Well, that's how I consider things valid. And I go, well, no, what I consider valid is what the Constitution and the right of individual says. There's nothing to do with your background. So then now you have a disconnect here between the two backgrounds. What one considers valid and the other one doesn't. It's just not you can't really cross communicate here. Something's getting lost. On a question of discursive, most political discussions are going to be strategic and rhetorical. How do I convince you? And there's nothing wrong with convincing people, by the way. We are supposed to convince people. But the debates usually work on both ends. It's always good to have more communicative action. It's always good to be more discursive, but 90% of the conversations are going to be strategical. If anyone want to see and how can be more discursive in that sense, good person that I always recommend for people to watch on how to be discursive is Dr. K. His conversations are extremely discursive. They're always meant to understand the other side. What if I'm talking to you? Who are you? Why are you? So if you want techniques there, I would say emulating Dr. K in a lot of ways is the best approach, because he has, for one, training as a psychologist, and they're trained to do exactly that. But he does it on a platform which everybody can see. So his approach is very good for discursive approaches. My approach politically is a little bit different. It's a challenging one, but it's kind of important. How do we engage with people who are not engaging seriously? Well, you got to treat them as unserious people. And this is really difficult to do. I can't do it. So take it as not as I say, but as I do kind of situation, because I'm just not that gifted of a debater. I just can't really do this. But you're going to make them look ridiculous in front of audiences if they're making ridiculous claim. Because one of the problems is, and this is something that happened, if any of you guys are interested in 18th century philosophers or 19th, David Hume writes an entire 6-volume book on the history of England. And in the 5th volume, he's talking about James I. And he says one of the problems that James has was that when Puritans and a bunch of other religious people came to him, he treated their argument seriously. And so their argument became serious despite being ridiculous. And he says, sometimes what you got to do is to treat ridiculous ideas ridiculously and make them look ridiculous in front of the audience. Because you're not going to convince me if I'm just memeing in the conversation of anything, because you and I don't share the background. So your only saving grace at that point is to make it seem like the person who's just like engaging and trying to ridicule the conversation is a ridiculous person in the eye of the audience.
The problem with that is that works even if the other people's arguments are actually serious. Someone who is good at that kind of technique can turn a very serious issue into a joke to people through this kind of rhetorical strategy. So it can be used for evil, if you want to you want to put it that way. And I think I honestly think that's part of the problem with our online discourse as well. Is too many people make very serious things into jokes, into memes, into something that people don't take seriously because they don't treat it seriously. So I agree with the effectiveness of that strategy, if you will. I'm just saying that it's a double-edged sword, right? And I just want to put that out. Yeah.
All of these are double-edged swords, my friend. What can be used for good can be used for evil a lot of times. I would also say this, when you said a lot of things are memes. I mean, nothing better for me encapsulates that statement than Elon Musk being the head of Doge, going on a TV show and saying, I have become the meme, as he's cutting jobs, doing them some serious damage to the livelihood of a lot of people who are banking on those jobs. I mean, nothing encapsulates that better than that, like physically. Unfortunately, yes, a lot of people do meme very serious conversations out of a serious topic. At that point, you gotta fight fire with fire. You gotta just try to out-meme them and try to make them seem ridiculous. It's unfortunate, but one of the biggest problems that happens a lot of times is, I've seen this happen, and this is not the claim that you should treat everybody this way. Some people are genuinely like bought in, but they're willing to engage with the conversation. If they're engaging with the conversation, reasonable and rational arguments, persuasion generally works, as long as you're trying to find the common ground and appeal to what they find important. But people who are just there farming clips and memeing and treating things ridiculously, it's going to make them seem ridiculous. And this is a lot harder to do, because when you do engage with ridiculous ideas seriously, you give them an aura of legitimacy, and that becomes a problem. That's a serious problem when somebody comes in and goes, oh, I believe all X causes Y. And you go, well, no, not all X causes Y. Here's some examples that I have factually based on scientific research. And then they respond with, well, how do you know these scientists weren't bought? Can you show me their bank accounts, where they got their funding from? Well, no, these are the funding they got from. Oh, you see that person that gave the funding that was affiliated with. Their arguments keeps getting more and more ridiculous. And as you treat them more seriously, they are taken as a more serious interlocutor, despite making crazy claims. So this becomes a challenge here to understand the context of the conversation. And it's very hard to do, very, very difficult to do when you're in the heat of the conversation and the opponent is making fun of you or attacking you, and you're like, okay, how do I respond to this and keep my own cool under control? How do I not go completely berserk and start like yelling at this person? But at the end of the day, debates are hard. Rhetoric is hard, and so is discourse. And I would say good debates, and debates are important. Debates have always been part of politics since ancient time, and they're not going anywhere. But people who engage in these debates need to also look at the audience more than just trying to convince the opponent, because sometimes the opponent is not going to be convinced.
I agree. I think that like we have to, on debate specifically, the job of a debater, in my opinion, is not even necessarily to convince the audience, though that is ideal. But there are certain audiences who are just never going to be convinced, right? Like if you go into certain communities, they're just you're not moving anyone. It's not happening. But what you can do, and what I think that the best debaters do, is they set up a formula. And they set up a formula that other people can use that watch it when they talk with their friends, family, and other audiences that might be convincible. How do I answer the questions that are being thrown at me by my debate opponent? How do I deal with the issues that are being brought up on this particular topic? So say you're debating immigration, right? And your interlocutor, your debate opponent, wants to shut down all the borders, deport all illegals and also legal immigrants from the last 20 years, whatever. They just want to get rid of them. You could be in a situation where you're never going to convince the other side, not their audience, not them. But what you can do is you can provide examples that especially if this is televised or streamed or whatever, that other people can use and bring to their audiences and to the other people that can be convinced on how to defeat the arguments that they're making for what it is that they're trying to do. I think it's like setting up a blueprint, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? That other people can follow. So even if you don't build the house in that specific instance, you set up a blueprint so others can in other instances where the foundation's better. I don't know. What are your thoughts here, Tali? I'm really curious.
I don't know. I'm like, in terms of like a prescriptive answer for you, I don't know, but I like the idea of what you're saying of sort of like laying down the blueprint and other people build off this. And I think that is sort of happening right now. Like there does seem to be a bit of a grassroots resurgence of liberal defense.
To just be clear, this is how like the last 20 years of discourse has happened, right? This is how it's done, is you have thought leaders that shape different arguments that are taken by others and propagated and adjusted to their various audiences. And this happens generally organically, right? It's just how ideas get spread. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to say that.
No, yeah, I mean, I don't. So, like, on the topic of immigration that you brought up, for example, I think
that was
like
just it was just a example, though. It could be applied to anything.
Well, it just brings me back to something that LP said earlier in the conversation about like liberalism basically being, the veil of ignorance, right? And like where you could be from any background, you could end up in any place. And so we want to design a society that's going to work best for most of the people. And you give the example of like, okay, if we're talking about a Christian autocracy or something, then if you happen to be a Jew or a Muslim or an atheist or something, that's not going to work for you. Whereas in a liberal society, that's going to work for the Christian, even if it's not their preferred system of governance. We're at a point right now where a segment, at least, of the right and some on like the horseshoe fringe of the left are saying we can't do that. We cannot, and in fact, we shouldn't be trying to create a society that's going to accommodate for all of these types of people. We should be trying to restrict our society so that it becomes more homogenous, and then these problems will essentially dissipate. So we're kind of like, I was going to say we're not speaking the same language, and that's a bit dramatic because obviously in the literal sense we are, and we're still like on the same topic, but we're going down very different roads in terms of people's like ideas for the future. And I think, again, sort of like disturbingly, is we're not even really talking about like cultural norms anymore. We're talking both on the left of liberalism and the right of liberalism of just completely reshaping our government system,
And this is why they work
overturning
together.
liberal democracy.
And
Yes, this is where they work together.
Yeah, this is a little bit all on the side, like somewhat off topic, but I think it is important to discuss. Is the far left and the far right, like horseshoe theory, isn't just that they have the same ideas, but they have the same short-term goal, to destroy liberalism and to destroy the liberal order. And they're working together to do that. They are gnawing at the pillars of our institutions, whether it be from the left or the right, and gnawing at the perception of our culture of what liberalism is, to redefine it as something wrong and bad and harmful. And they are the Fuenteses of the world and the Ibram X. Kendis of the world are joined hand in hand in this endeavor. Okay, they are all of them gnawing at liberalism, because until you destroy liberalism, they can't get what they want. Liberalism won't allow it on either side, right? Liberalism will allow them to exist and allow them to evangelize a little bit, right? And they can have some of what they want, but it's not enough for them. It's not autocracy, and they both want a form of autocracy, right? And I think that that's why I am so dead set on strengthening liberalism, not just in our culture, but our institutions as well, because that cannot be allowed to happen. We know what a non-liberal society looks like. We have countless examples throughout history. All of them are way worse than what we got now. Every single one. There's never been a good one.
Most societies have been illiberal throughout history, and there's a reason why most the most prosperous ones are liberal right now. And people can say, well, yeah, a lot of these Western nations have done this through exploitation of others. There's an argument to be made there, but I would argue that liberalism is one of the primary reasons. Yeah, I think there's the liberalism as an institution or as a political system is why a lot of these countries have become what they are. I mean, there was the best example I have, the best story I have is one of my professors once told me that actually it's the same person. I can give you two, sir, because Tali also mentioned a while back about money in politics. I think that's a big one. So my professor once was from a university in the United States, and he was of Iranian background. He went to US to study, and he got his PhD, and then he was going to graduate. So he went to take his picture, and he went there, they took a picture, and then they handed it to them. He looked at the picture, looked at the guy who took the photo, looked back at the picture, look at the guy and go, "This sucks." And the guy looks at them, looks at the picture, looks back at him, smiles and goes, "I don't have much to work with, buddy." And that's kind of liberalism. I mean, that's the best we got. And yeah, human beings are messy creatures, but listen, liberalism has succeeded into making very, very diverse people from the very inception. It was this very idea of making sure that people are not fighting on religious war terms anymore, and managed to bring us together. And you see people today that are not supposed to be 200, 300, 500 years ago would have been impossible to work together. They were killing each other in the continent of Europe, but now they're living together in peace. They're from European unions. You think if I went back to like 1400 and told someone from England that they're going to be able to work with the French, they'll agree with me? No, they'll be like, that's crazy. But they are. So the proof is in the pudding, I mean, historically. And the second story I was going to talk about money in politics is that there's a lot, I think this is a bit overblown. And one of the good example of it that I have today, if you want, I can tell you the story too, but one of the good example of it today is Trump's administration have been browbeating a lot of big business people into submitting to him. If money was the issue, if money had the final say, they will be the one that telling Trump what to do, not Trump putting Zuckerberg on his side and then having him say random numbers about how many jobs he created and then go back and say, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I didn't realize what number you wanted me to say. This is a pretty good example that money isn't the end all be all in politics. And money is only a way for you to get eyes on you. And that's where the power of the money really comes from. But also, and this is example here in Canada, the same professor, he was of Iranian background, and a bunch of Iranian businessmen during Harper's era. The Harper administration had the Canadian embassy in Iran removed. And so a lot of Iranian businessmen came to my professor and said, hey, listen, professor, you have been a pillar of the community. You have been studying politics for 30 years now. Can you help us lobby the government to hear us out? And he says, okay, sure. And he did. And they did. And they got a chance to talk to their member of parliament. And when they went there, they asked my professor to come with them to make the argument. My professor said, listen, the same argument says, just tell them how much money you pay, how much lobbying you've done, and they will hear you out. Very, very claim that a lot of people on the left make as well. The member of parliament walked in and she sat down, they sat down and said, listen, our taxpayers alone are paying for the lights of this place to be on. We have paid so much money into this government. Why are you doing that? We want you guys to listen to us, what we have to say. And she turned around and told them, listen, the only reason why I am talking to you now is because of the money. But if you want me to listen, you have to be a voting bloc. If you're not a voting bloc, your opinion is irrelevant. I don't care how much money you spend. Because at the end of the day, that's what gets me elected. How many people vote for me? So
Absolutely.
voting, I was telling, this is one thing I said to my student. This is straight out of the horse's mouth. They're like, yeah, listen, you want me to listen? I'll talk to you. Sure, money gets you access to talk to me. You want me to listen? I need you to be a valid voting bloc. If you're not, I don't care. You're just one individual among many. I have a constituency to appeal to. And this is the truth of politics. And people say money, it's a lot of time is overblown because it's about if you vote and if you can get your voice heard. And I have students who come in and tell me after class, when I tell them this, how do I make my voice heard then? I don't have money and I don't have, and my response is probably the best bet you have is to go to a city council meeting with your friend and like show up with like 10 or 15 people in a city council meeting and have your problems heard. That's probably the best bet you have because you're not going to be able to go to the Senate or the Parliament.
People underestimate just how effective it is to do that, to go to your local council with a posse, right? With a few of you, like you only need like 10, okay? And they will treat you as a far bigger block than you actually are. One of the problems, one of the great and terrible things of local politics is it's about who shows up, right?
Yeah.
You can have the best ideas, doesn't matter if the other side's showing up and their ideas are shit. They're the ones that are going to get listened to because they're the ones that are seen as the voting block, right? That's coming in. Yep. That's seen as they care enough to actually do something about the issue, right? And so it's back to what you said the biggest problem was with liberalism, or the biggest threat to liberalism, is lazy liberals. Absolutely. We have taken for granted the state of affairs, that it's always going to be thus. And you have people who are working overtime to change it. There are far less of them, and they're far dumber. But they are motivated and they are working hard to get what they want. Mm-hmm. We need to also work hard to stop them and to get what we want. And that involves putting this down, okay? Turning off your TV, turning off the internet, and going outside to your local city council meeting, going outside, not to some protest or something, but to actually go in front of the decision makers and get your voice heard. And people just don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's when you say online debates, and this comes back, it's easy consumption of like political acuity, I guess you could say, without actually engaging with politics. Because it's fun to watch debates. Don't get me wrong. I love Jerry Springer too. My grandma, whenever she was here, she would watch Jerry Springer. She loved that stuff. But you can't just have that. You need to actually be part of the practical element of politics as well. And again, this story, I hope this sticks with people, but I never forget, she said to them straight up, listen, the Iranian voting bloc is not a legitimate voting bloc. You guys vote in all sorts of directions. You vote conservative, you vote NDP, you vote liberal. You don't vote for one party or the other. So I can't really count on you. So I don't care. I'm not gonna listen. I'm not gonna listen to you. I'm gonna talk to you, but I'm not gonna listen to you because again, my job isn't tied to your vote. You guys vote all over the place. If people wanna have effect, they have to present themselves as somebody who can make a politician by voting in massive numbers. This is how a lot of people get their policies passed. And people say, well, how does it? And I know there has been studies that show billionaire money ties to the opinion of the people, but politicians, I should say, and counteract the opinion of the people. I know there's a study people like to talk about a lot, but the issue with that is a lot of businesses donate to politicians that already agree with them. It's not like they donate money and suddenly they come around. Some do, but politicians, believe it or not, at the end of the day, are really tied to their constituency. If they feel like their seat is threatened and that the people are not going to vote for them, they will start listening to you because their job depends on it. So another problem is that a lot of people, also city council and local politics is a good example. People look internationally a lot. And that's not good for politics because you can't really change international politics. You can change local politics. You have a lot more impact there. So you got to start small. You can maybe even get members of parliament or Senate elected, but you're not going to change Donald Trump's mind on Israel-Palestine issue. You're not gonna turn Canada's relation with China overnight. You're not gonna change France's relation with the European Union overnight. These are international issues that are important, but when you look too big, you have this sense of helplessness, which results in you engaging more in online debates, consumption.
Yeah, you want to be performative.
Yeah.
You want to. It's empty calories, right? It's empty calories.
Exactly.
It's not effective. This outside of a certain angle, it has to. It's sugar. It's fine. It can even be very helpful. But it shouldn't be your main dish, okay? Shouldn't be the main thing you do.
No. One of the things you can also do in your interpersonal life, you say about debates and such, is that it sounds small, but if 800 people do it, that might turns out to be like 12,000 people. But in your personal life, this is something that Habermas talks about too in his book called Transformation of Public Sphere, I think.
Transformation? Oh, is he one of those wokes? With the trans.
He's part of the critical theory.
Sorry.
His school is called critical theory, so he might be. But one of the things that he says is that post the whole kingship and stuff, what happened is that a lot of political debates went away from the courts of kings and moved to coffee shops. And that became the new public sphere. And we start talking more and more politics there. So if you want to be effective in a more interpersonal level, and if you can convince like 5 people, if there are like 800 of you trying to convince 5 people, that's a lot of people you just convince of your position. So learning not just debate on personal level, but maybe engage discursively first, trying to understand where they're coming from, why something is important to them, and then pointing your finger on those important things to them, and then trying to make your case for them is a lot more persuasively stronger than just coming in and telling, hey, don't you care about tax policies? Well, they might not. You can say, hey, don't you care about immigration policy? They might not. They might be one issue. They might only care about, for example, gun rights or something. Then you can talk about that. But unless you find out what is it that's important to them, no matter how many arguments I give to somebody, if that's not something they value, it doesn't matter how rational it is. They just don't care. It's not important to them.
I think that when it comes to this show, okay, get a little meta here, okay. What I try to do, because I recognize a lot of what I do is entertainment. It's entertainment, but I do want to have some sort of impact on the world. I would like that. That would be a good thing. Blueprints. We talked about that. because you mentioned something very important. If you have 800 people and they all go home and they convince 5 people, you've just convinced, what, 4,000? I think is the number, if I'm doing my math right. A good amount of people, right? That's a solid amount. What we have 60 people in my YouTube chat. We have 20 people in my Twitch chat-ish, right? It goes up and down. If half of you, so about 40 of you, take the blueprints that you take from my show on how to argue for liberalism, how to sell liberalism to people. If you see that and see what's effective, what's not effective, by watching me win and lose debates on this, right? You can go to your family and your friends and make those same arguments, the good ones, right? And hopefully convince your fellows. My first step is convincing you that you should do that, right? To selling that idea to you. That's ideally what I'd like to do. So, I don't know. That's me. But you're right.
And
Go ahead.
Well, I wonder in the balance of things, of delivering our message, of protecting liberalism, I wonder how much time needs to be spent promoting liberalism, reminding complacent people who were just born into the system of like why it is so unique and why it's a system worth maintaining, liberal democracy, and how much time should be spent specifically attacking the threats to liberalism from the left and right. So specifically drawing lines in the sand between, liberal democracy and leftists who want to promote communism, and people on the far right who want to promote like Christian nationalism. How much time, in weighting these things, how much time do you think should be spent in each of these things?
Good question. I think that if we can get a solid foundation of why liberalism should matter to you, because LP mentioned something important, like if it doesn't feel like it matters to them, right, they're not going to care. So I think that's step one, and I think that's going to be the initial focus, at least, because these numbers will change, right, as we go, and I do think that initially, and what I'm trying to do right now is just to remind people, liberalism is why you have good things. Almost every good experience you have in your life is allowed by liberalism. It protects you from people who would do you great amounts of disservice and harm. And you need to remember why you have what you have and the system that has allowed you to flourish, or at least to try to flourish as you would.
So how do we prove that?
That's a good question, right? I think that,
because people want arguments, understandably so, and especially the people who are promoting these counter ideologies, communism, fascism, whatever. They earnestly believe that within their system they'll also be able to maintain the fruits of liberal democracy, right? They don't think that they're signing up for a worse nation. So how can you prove, what evidence can you provide that, like you said, Whick, everything good basically that we have today is the result of this liberal
compare
democracy?
And contrast, right? And comparing and contrasting the existing Western liberal nations with everything else. And I think that on almost every metric, liberal nations come out ahead, right? And simply asking them the question, hey, would you rather live here or would you rather live in Afghanistan, right? Where would you rather be a citizen of? Because that theological system that you want, it exists. You can go live there now, but you don't. Why not? Right? Why aren't you going to move to Afghanistan? Why aren't you going to Russia? Right? Why don't you go join China? Right? If that's what you want to live like. Is there a reason?
Yeah.
And I think that's I don't think they can get past that argument, but I could be wrong.
There's also the claim historically that anybody who was at the initial stages of any revolutionary ideas, whether it's communism, fascism, or Islamic Republic of Iran, whatever, whoever was at the forefront of it end up getting offed by when they came to power. good example that I always like. Did you guys watch Mahdi Hassan debate with the Jubilee folks that he had, like 20 people? That was
I
crazy.
watched parts of it. I don't like those Jubilee debates, but yeah.
It's not good, but there was a guy there who said, well, Carl Schmitt. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Carl Schmitt, but Carl Schmitt was a Nazi jurist. He like a genuine like SS carrying Nazi jurist. And he wrote a book, multiple books actually, justifying the fascist state. Guess what happened to him? He got persecuted by that very state when they thought that his ideology or his subscription wasn't hard enough with the movement. So they start persecuting him and start by putting him on trials, despite him being their golden boy. This is just common. Like a lot of other nations, Stalin, when he came to power, he persecuted a lot of his interlocutors and then start censoring them. Censoring not as in like stopping them from, but removing them from picture as if they never existed.
Yes.
This is a common trope that history has proven. Iran 1979 revolution, the same thing. I'm sure if I look at North Korea's history, it would be the exact same thing. China, same thing. Any of these regimes, Putin's Russia, same thing. If I look any of these nations, I will find these trends. It's always fun to think, oh, I am going to be the one that's going to be getting the benefit of this, and I'm going to be fighting on the front lines for it. But you're usually the first that gets sacrificed because, well, you have been very involved with the movement. Power to you, but we don't need you anymore. So see ya. We need other people in charge who know less than you, who are less less ideologically rigid as you are. Because if you're very ideologically married to this idea, what happens is that and this is something that a lot of politicians find very quickly, when you try to implement some policy that may not work with the ideology, which you will have to do because nations are big and interests diverge, and what works in theory doesn't necessarily come to be the same in practice, you're going to be the first people that dissent. So you can't be allowed here because you're too involved with the idea. You're not in love with the nation or the regime. You're in love with the idea. And sometimes ideas need to be malleable because, yeah, we preach equality, but equality for some, not all. This is a famous Animal Farm statement. So how do you... Tali also mentioned something about different roads. About going on different roads, different ideologies. And I think what Whick mentioned and what I would advocate for is on a much more individual level, talking about these issues with your friends and family, because it's always good to be a big platform and talking about these issues and trying to bring people to your side. And that's always the best option to have, but that's not always plausible. So the best thing you can do is to change the cultural discussions that we are having, or change the background discussions to make certain things that are liberal seem more valid, or change the standard of what constitute valid claims on the background. And that can only happen from the ground up. So if enough people believe in something, that becomes the way we validate something. So more people need to, this goes back to what Whick and I are saying, which is liberalism needs to be proud of its liberal heritage. It needs to be proud of saying liberalism is great. We have to be proud of the institutions and try to defend those. And then the background culture starts taking in these arguments and then adjusting accordingly. This is not an overnight thing. This is not a year or a 5-year thing. This might take decades because it takes 10 seconds to destroy a bridge. It takes years to build it. And that's unfortunately just where we are at. But the fight got to start somewhere. And on your question of how much time you put into attacking or defending liberalism against challengers and convincing people, they're not necessarily exclusive. You can do both. The way you defend liberalism can be a way as a response to the challengers. You might not be able to do this in a debate in the heat of the moment, but when you're making, like, I try to do this a lot in my YouTube videos when I'm like criticizing or laying out the critique of liberalism, I try to respond to it as well and saying, hey, this is a critique, but here's a response to them why liberalism is not so bad as some of these people say it is. The question being more individualized or lonely is a good example. You say, well, we become more atomized and we're becoming more lonely, therefore liberalism sucks because it makes us lonely. That is not true. We just need better tools. We need new tools to deal with these new challenges. Again, you don't even need to, like Vic says, put the phone down. You don't even need to put the phone down, but you can change your consumption of products. instead of like always watching Jerry Springer, for example. This is maybe I'm dating myself a lot here, but instead of just watching Jerry Springer, you can also watch other things that you might learn something from and much expand your understanding, or just read a book on your or listen to a book. Do something that expands your knowledge, just like empty calories. Again, we have been given the tools with the technology, but that doesn't mean we have to only use it in one specific way, even though we always want to, because, well, chips are delicious and we always like to eat them, but they're not always good for us.
$5 from Old School to say, if this was covered, I apologize. Liberalism is a tradition with many aspects. I'm a conservative lib to preserve the older ideals of liberalism. What would you say to that?
So yes, liberalism has basically, I would say, if you are not trying to uproot the institutions and break the procedures, but you're saying, hey, listen, we need to put the damper on the movement and the progressive movement, I think you can be a liberal there, because there are conservative liberals. For example, I can think of is like one of the famous one is, I would say, Burke. Edmund Burke is somebody who's consistently associated with the conservative movement, and rightfully so. He's a conservative. He was a conservative, and he was a very brilliant individual. But even he says, listen, conservatism doesn't mean no change. It means cautious change. And that's, I think, the key point. You can be a conservative, but that doesn't mean moving backwards, which I find a lot of Republicans, and it hasn't come here yet, but we do have aspect here in Canada too, with some conservative movements here that are saying, no, we should move backwards. That is not a solution. Or some say just flat out stop all the change. That is also not the solution, because if you start changing, you're just going to be left behind from the world. The rest of the world is going to change, and you're just going to be left behind. You're going to end up like North Korea. That's the best example I can think of. So if you're a conservative liberal, that would be like your go-to. You want cautious change. You don't want stoppage to the whole progressive movement. But you say, hey, listen, before we progress further, let's just wait and like mull this over a little bit. And I'm sympathetic to that argument. That's not, again, I'm not a conservative liberal. I would call myself a Rawlsian egalitarian liberal. But I am sympathetic to Burkeans who argue that. Unfortunately, there's not many of you left, Mr. Conservative Liberal, right now. There's more and more movement toward the extreme right now. So power to you, and I wish you the best. That's what I would say to that super chatter.
Tali, go ahead. You want to say something?
You think Ben Shapiro qualifies as a conservative liberal?
Oh, I watch your slight debates with Pisco, and I know
forget
you mentioned
anything
that.
I've said. I'm just
yes.
curious. Like, maybe you're not familiar with Ben Shapiro, but that's someone that I would put in that camp personally. People like try to attribute him as being super far right, and I think that's not true at all. And I think he's actually trying to fight in his own ways while balancing an audience and things like this. I think he's trying to fight some of the more extreme and
you know what?
repressive and regressive parts of his party.
Speaking of like people on the right that I found. Okay, don't dogpile me here. Okay, just listen, hear me out before you go. Recently, and this is crazy to say, I feel crazy saying it. Nick Fuentes.
No. You're reading this so wrong. No, that's not what he's doing. It's not what he's doing.
I don't know. He's really going after his audience for being dumb shits, okay? And
yeah, he's dunking on them
because
like that's a fun thing to do, and because a lot of his audience is like significantly more retarded than him. He's not retarded, but he is by no stretch of the imagination trying to protect
I don't think he is. That's not what I'm going to say, okay? You got to let me get it out, right? But
okay.
I think
you triggered me. Whick.
I understand.
I've officially been triggered.
What he is doing, though, that I think is better than the Walshes and the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and all these others, is he is willing to critique the party in power that Carlsons and all these others don't.
Stop it. So many people do that. That's That's the thing too.
Hold
that I
on.
think
How
people on the
has
left,
hold
and
on?
I'm not
How
even
has Matt Walsh or Tucker Carlson or Crowder in any meaningful way
Tucker Carlson
gone after?
speaks out against the Trump administration while trying to walk this line of like, but I still support Trump, you know, and I'm still a Republican and this and that. But that's the cool thing to be on the right now is anti-Republican establishment, basically. You could even
Okay.
argue that sort of,
I'm
not that
talking
it started
MAGA,
with Trump, but
not
like
Republicans. Okay, difference.
they're not. Yeah, Tucker Carlson is literally not MAGA
He's not. I
anymore.
disagree.
Nope, he's definitely not. And this is again where I think, like, as someone who spends some time or has spent time consuming right-wing media, the left thinks that the right is much more unified than they actually are. It is true, they will vote for the Republican candidate.
Yes, that's why they are more unified.
That doesn't make them MAGA. In the same way that, like, it's people who want to call me MAGA, like, okay, if what you mean by MAGA is
I'm
like
not
you
calling
voted
you
for
MAGA
that
because you
person
don't
one
advocate
time.
for what
I know you're I
Mm.
know you're not. I know you're not, but I'm trying to make the point that, like, yes, the right all comes together and they will vote for whoever the Republican nominee is, but they have very serious fissures within their movement. And Tucker Carlson, I would say, is certainly not MAGA. And there's a whole, I mean, you can see the horseshoe of the people on the far left and the far right who are all coming together to agree about these things. These are not, I don't see Marjorie Taylor Greene is not being brave and standing up against her party. Like that. I think I view this.
She's not standing up against her
very
party in any
differently.
meaningful way. Neither is Tucker Carlson, neither is Candace Owens, neither are any of these people. They're doing what's called safe critique, right? Where they can critique in a very safe, sanitized manner that doesn't do anything, right? And there's fundamentally different.
But they're more beholden. Yeah, but they're, if anything, maybe more beholden to their audiences than to like the MAGA base. I think, again, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, the people that you just named, these people are not MAGA anymore. They're literally not. And the left, I just think it's an inaccurate like assessment of what's actually going on the right. And the left really does see the right as much more unified than they actually are. These people are like, they have different motivations. They're talking to different audiences. Yeah, Tucker Carlson and these people, they are to the right of MAGA on a number of issues.
I don't think that makes them, they are still, again, promoting and advocating and wanting what Trump does.
Not really.
Okay, like immigration, okay? They're pretty
sure. So some of them have overlapping goals with Trump. Yes, especially if
I
they
think
are
most
like
of their
Republicans.
goals
But a
are
lot
overlapping with Trump.
But I see that as incidental. So like Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
isn't like pushing for deportations because he's towing the Trump line. He's pushing for deportations because that's part of his political disposition. Like that's something that him, and who knows how much Trump even believes in this stuff, but that's something that like him and MAGA have in common, happen to have in common. But I mean, Tucker Carlson is out there criticizing the Trump administration in soft language, I'll give you that, on every single one of his podcasts. Criticizing the strike in Iran, criticizing multiple different actions that the administration takes, and he's still very well respected and accepted on the right. So the right also, like, they don't advertise their infighting, perhaps you could say, but I think it's inaccurate assessment of what's actually going on live on the right now to lump everybody in as MAGA and everyone's just like working to push the Trump line. There are a lot of people with significant power on the right who are working to push way past the Trump line. Like,
yes,
it's funny.
But
so you bring up Nick Fuentes. Let me round it back to Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes isn't standing up against the Republicans because he's, you could argue he's principled, but it's not because of anything even approximating like liberalism. It's because he feels that the Trump administration is a bunch of like faggot Zionists. That's what he thinks.
We are on Twitch.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Sorry.
You have the pass
Twitch,
though,
please
since
don't
you
take
are
Whick
one,
down.
right? You're a lesbian. So
true. That's true. I get the F pass.
Yes.
Yeah. Nick is fighting against MAGA because he thinks that they are cucks who aren't actually living up to the nationalist vision that he prefers. So This was all my reaction to you bringing up Nick Fuentes as an example of someone who is like taking a stand. I think that's totally the wrong way to view it. I think it's an effort to make his message more palatable. And it seems to be having that effect, unfortunately. But I don't.
Okay,
I think we're maybe reading it very differently.
Yes, we are, because you are looking at these individual factions within MAGA and saying, well, no, they're different factions. They're all MAGA. But MAGA as an overarching umbrella encompasses all of these factions. They're all working together, right? They may have disparate.
No.
They are. We can look at this by their actions.
They just will. They
Hold
all
on.
vote for
Which
Trump.
is more
They will
important?
all
Let's
vote
start
for whoever the
foundational. Which is
Republican
more
nominee
important,
is.
what someone says or what someone does?
If what someone does.
So if what someone
literally
does,
who they
regardless
vote
of what
for-
they say, is
No, no,
support Trump
no,
over and over and over
wait.
again in their actions, who cares what they say?
I care because it matters.
Okay, it doesn't matter. You can say
I
all
think
you want
I know the
about
enemy
like
better.
you
I
want to
think I know the
protect
enemy
kids,
better than
and
you,
you.
frankly.
I don't think you do.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead, LP. What are your thoughts?
That was fun.
Choose a side, LP.
Yeah. So I think the conversation here is what we talked about when it comes to voting bloc, and I think that's what Whick's point is getting at. It's like they're a voting bloc. When it comes down to it, they'll go and vote, and that's what changes the policy. And that's, at least that's my impression of what Whick is saying, is that that's what comes down to changing policy, and that's what matters right now. Policy is what matters, and they might have different intention than the Trump administration, but if they're willing to swallow it and swallow their principle and vote anyway, because whether tangentially relating or just because they're
because it's the closest to what they want. It's the closest to what they want. It's more similar to their vision than Kamala Harris was. But yeah, I think it's to our own demise. I think like I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. Yeah.
So
sorry,
I hear you,
continue,
Tali.
I interrupted you.
No, that's totally fine. I hear you. But I think the important point here is that this comes back to the language. You're talking discursively. It's like, why do people do what they do? That's what and Whick is saying, well, what they do is hurting us right now. We have to talk about strategy right now. And this is where the conversation gets a little bit missed. And if you want me to choose a side, unfortunately, I'll be on Whick's side on this. I'm not an American again. I'm a Canadian, but as Pierre Trudeau said very wisely, America and Canada are like an elephant and a mouse sleeping next to each other. No matter how benevolent, we'll feel you guys moving around. It's our destinies are tied together. There's just no way around it. So I do take a vested interest in the success of your politics. Prosperity of your nation, because then my nation becomes prosperous as well by extension. But I would be sympathetic to Whick's argument, mainly because policy does come back a lot more. Policy and strategy is what changes politics a lot of times. If you want to change the MAGA's mind, I don't think you can change everybody's mind. There are some people that are just gone, and I'll get to the Matt Walsh's and Ben Shapiro's question in a second. But when you're trying to engage on a more individual level with some MAGA, I would take your side on this. You say, well, you got to engage discursively with individuals because not everybody has the same position and not even have the same interest. But when it comes to the macro policy level, I think Whick is right. It's what comes down to policy at the end of the day is, are you a voting bloc? And Republicans are a very solid voting bloc, whether they agree with Trump or not. That's where it comes down to.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And again, that
Tali
part
sees the
is
argument.
true.
I love it. Okay.
No, but I do think it's worth like these fissures on the right are very real, and it seems like the more extreme parts of the right, the more extreme wings, are absolutely winning in the court of public opinion. They have the larger audiences. I think it matters, and it's going to matter more and more. And so I think it's worth, especially if we're looking for partners to fight this with. Some of those partners are going to be on the right. They're going to be people who voted for Trump. I think that matters. Like, I think that's material to the discussion of
Yes.
preserving our
like
liberal
if your argument is there are people on the right that can be worked with and there are people on the right that cannot, sure. I just don't think that like
that's not what I'm arguing, but that's part of the argument. But anyway, this all started with Nick Fuentes, so let me not derail any longer. LP, did you want to touch on like the Daily Wire crew or something?
I can. on the Fuentes front, I'm not familiar with his work. I have heard of him, and everything I have heard makes me want to stay away from his content. So I can't really give an informed opinion on this individual. Daily Wire crew. I know we have mutual friends that sometimes like even Cowell. I think his name is Michael Cowell. I don't like any of those crew. Matt Walsh, Cowles, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is an oddball out. If you would ask me 10 years ago or before Trump's first term whether Ben Shapiro constitutes a liberal, I would have said yes. But post-Trump election, I would not say he's a Trump sycophant per se, but I would categorize him as a coward because he has moved on some of his positions, but which is not a problem. People move, change positions all the time. But my problem is that the arguments he's giving are just so subpar, it's almost comical. Like one of the arguments that I heard him give was, well, do you measure the success of Trump the same way you measure the success of Biden or something? And he responded something along the lines of, no, I would mark Trump on a curve. And that is like such a ridiculous argument that just stinks to me of somebody who wants to be in the Republican Party but sees where he's going, doesn't agree with it, but he has to make some sort of argument for it. So I put him as a coward section because he's not really launching like substantive critiques that he wants. Again, going back to the conservative liberal in your super chat, Wick, one of the things that the conservatives love, and that has been the case throughout history, except this administration, are institutions. Conservatives love institutions.
MAGA isn't conservative. Let's just put that to rest
right
now. Yeah, they're not. But go ahead.
They're the new MAGA movement. They are very anti-institutional. They are very much anti. Part of the arguments that a lot of conservatives make is that why institutions are important is because one of the institutions is what? Churches are an institution. Family is an institution. The Supreme Court is an institution. If you put a gun to my head and say, hey, can you tell me a single conservative liberal that you admire or you looked up to at some point, I would name Antonin Scalia. I know that might be a controversial claim among some people, but I think Scalia is somebody I would look at and go, here's a conservative individual. He is a liberal individual. I might disagree with his rulings. I might disagree with his argument, but he's making genuine arguments. He's not making random arguments, at least the ones I've read. I know some people might find that controversial. Some people might not like him, which again, totally fair. I don't like his arguments as much, but at least he's trying to give a reasonable argument, and he's going from a position of, I guess you say, honest self-expression. Whether you agree or not, that's a different question. But he's somebody you can disagree with and argue with, and he would have engaged with you. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but I would say he was one of the conservative liberals that I would categorize as a liberal and a conservative. Ben Shapiro, I don't consider him anymore post-Trump election. Ivan Fuentes, I don't know. Matt Walsh and the entire Daily Wire crew, they stink of performative to me. They just seem to me like people who want to go on Twitter and get like clips. Same thing with Charlie Kirk. There's not that many. Candace Owen is just a whole other camp of nonsense and craziness. But I don't know if there is anyone, at least I can't think of at the top of my head, anyone as big as like the Daily Wires or Charlie Kirk's that I would say, here's a conservative liberal.
What about I don't think they're as big as, but I was reminded in my chat, the Bulwark.
I've never heard of them.
Well, they're
some of the Bulwark are certainly like conservative liberals.
Yeah.
I think I made the Bulwark is basically a media organization founded in the wake of Trump that is essentially like never Trump Republicans.
It's anti-MAGA.
And so so some of these people have like formally changed party, others haven't. Tim Miller runs the Bulwark, and he's someone who he's definitely like moved left in the last like 10 years, I would say. But also I think some of the interviews and conversations I watch him have, he just like he talks to a lot of people on the left, and to me it's so clear that it's like these are like not his people. I don't know, like he has to swallow a lot of crazy. But I would put him in like fighting the good fight, certainly. And I guess just slightly taking it back to Ben Shapiro, I will readily agree with the cowardice critique. I think that's accurate. And I agree with you. I think, like, especially for someone who, I'm just glazing Ben Shapiro, but I think he's a very smart man. And so for someone who is able to make very compelling arguments in so many different domains, I think you're right. His explanation for his change on Trump, because he originally was against Trump, didn't I don't think he voted for him in 2016 at all, actually. But yeah, he hasn't been able to explain that turn as compellingly. I think there's a simple answer that, again, is sort of like what we were talking about everyone on the right just voting together anyway, is like, well, Trump, it was the Republican nominee. I'm a Republican. This person's going to get more done that's in line with what I want. So I actually think that is a fair argument. Like, how much truth is there in that? And I do think that Ben Shapiro is walking a delicate line, and arguably, and I'm not inside his brain, so I don't know what he's doing, but I think arguably maybe he treads softly, especially on the MAGA stuff, so that he can maintain his credibility as someone on the right, right? Because what you see with people like the Bulwark, the people who are part of the Bulwark have no sway on the right anymore. They put themselves out there as like going against MAGA and going against modern Republican Party. And so they're not considered in conversations on the right? So I think there's part of this perhaps as a strategy on Ben Shapiro's part of like keeping himself in the conversation and sort of in good standing as a Republican. But I mean, he's someone, he interviewed Zelensky, like a multi-hour interview. I think he takes stances pretty frequently. He came out strongly against the tariffs. I think he takes stances with frequency that go against the administration's policies, not wholeheartedly. He doesn't rage against them. He doesn't call them evil and racist and dumb and all these things. But I do think that where he has equal parts, maybe bravery is probably a strong word, but he also like is willing to bite a lot of those bullets. I think, at least.
Did he who did he endorse in the last Republican like primary? Do you guys remember? Ben Shapiro.
I want to say he was an early endorser of what's his face from Florida.
DeSantis? I don't know. I don't remember who Ben.
But he got behind Trump. Trump pretty quickly consolidated the nomination there, right? And so he got behind Trump, but I'm pretty sure he was a DeSantis supporter at first.
If he stayed a DeSantis supporter, I would be a lot more sympathetic. If he remained a DeSantis, I have to look again. If he would remain a DeSantis supporter, I would have been a lot sympathetic to your argument, Tali. But my problem is that if he did came out Trump before Trump won, if he won, there's an argument to be made that he's trying to like toe the line. But if he came behind Trump before the primaries were over, when Trump was talking about tariffs, I'm a lot less sympathetic, because at that point, when Trump is saying, I'm going to tariff, and Shapiro's like, I'm against tariff, which I think he is. I don't think he has always struck me as a pro-capitalist, free trade kind of guy. If that was the case, and he still came out in support of Trump, I would say that's one of the biggest cowardice move you can be. I'm not saying any critics of that, not saying substantive critiques of that, trying to push Trump in one direction, because what we see, at least in some, I don't know how it is in the groundwork on the United States section, and since we're on the topic of discourse, but a lot of times here, one of the things people do is try to push politicians in one direction or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if Shapiro tried to push Trump into an anti-tariff position, again, I'll be sympathetic to the argument that Shapiro is making, but if he wasn't and he just said, well, I'm against the tariffs, I don't care anymore, and didn't really push Trump or Trump administration in that direction, I'd be a lot less sympathetic to Shapiro. But I understand, and I would say this, Shapiro doesn't strike me as, I guess, a MAGA type of figure, even though he is right now by the virtue of his vote and being part of the voting bloc. He deep down does seem like he's just a conservative, but he has to toe the line. And the fact that he keeps doing it is kind of demonstration of a cowardice, as I said. Another person I can think of that I respect a lot in your political system, I think his name is what was his name? The senator or
Thomas
congressman
Massey,
who became
Rand Paul.
Is it Massey? Not Rand Paul either. He's not a politician anymore, but he's a never Trumper, and he's appeared on Piers Morgan a couple of times. Joe Walsh.
Yes.
He's another guy I respect a lot.
Okay.
He's
Joe
another
Walsh.
like conservative. No, I'm not saying I understand why Ben Shapiro wouldn't be a Joe Walsh, because if he does, his livelihood is out the door. Like that's entire Shapiro brand. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not sympathetic when it comes to Ben Shapiro as much, mainly because of his cowardice. And liberalism needs people on the right as well to push back against the crazies on the right. And I know that there are people on the left who are pushing back against the crazies on the left. I know Whick has done that a few times. I know other people in the sphere that are doing that. But I see like Joe Walsh as one of the sole voices doing this. I haven't heard of the Bulwark, so maybe they're pushing back. So if they are, power to them. I hope they get a lot more views, and I hope they succeed in their endeavors. But with the Daily Wire crew, I'm not optimistic. Charlie Kirk, I'm not. I don't think they're gonna be.
The Daily Wire is not. It's not a potential ally. They're just gone. It is 8:00. And I do want to give you a chance to. We don't want to keep you hostage here, right? So
no, this was very pleasant. I hope it was entertaining.
I enjoyed it. Give us your outro. Yeah. Tell people where they can find you if they want to find you. I have a link to his YouTube channel in my YouTube description, gang, and please go give him a follow. But yeah, give us your closing thoughts, and then me and Tali will talk a bit, and we'll let you go. And yeah, go ahead.
First, I want to thank both of you for having me. This was a great conversation. I enjoyed it, and I actually learned something, so that was kind of fun about Mr. Fuentes. So that was interesting.
Whatever Whick told you, don't listen.
Don't listen. Fair enough. But I also want to thank your audience for having me. I hope they enjoyed the conversation. My channel name is The Liberal Professor. I make videos about liberalism, and if I were to leave any message for particularly the younger folks in your audience, get involved in politics. Start small. You don't need to run for president on the first time around. Engage in politics on a small level. Get with your community. Start forming a community if you don't have one, and bring like-minded people and try to convince one person of your position and do the base. Because if everybody does it, 60 people turns to 100 people, 100 people turns to 200, and you can change the discourse of a nation. Always start small. Never look too big.
Okay, well, thank you again for coming. I appreciated the insight that you had, especially to kind of like the foundational liberal philosophy and things like that. And I'd love to have you on again. Check them out, gang. We'll see you later, buddy.
Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Bye, the liberal professor. How do you think it went? What are your thoughts?
I think that was a cool conversation. In the beginning, it was like there's so much kind of background, right, to want to set it up. So I think we struggled with navigation a little bit right in the beginning, but I think it ended up being an interesting and fruitful conversation. And it's just, I could have this conversation every day. It's like, it's very salient right now, and it's important. I guess, I was hoping that he would come in and he would just have all of the prescriptions for us, right? He would just have all the answers.
Wouldn't that be nice, right?
I know. Yeah. But it's, I appreciate someone like him who really is sort of grounded in the philosophy. And I think that's maybe like part of my question about like how much time should we spend defending and promoting liberalism versus effectively attacking fascism and communism. I think part of that is it can be kind of hard to describe liberalism. Like in a concise way, in a way that feels very tangible, which is sort of like the question I was asking you. It's like, how can we prove to people that the life that they have now is actually connected to this thing? And I think pointing out other societies is a good way to go about it. I think that is effective because at least it paints a picture, even if it's like not drawing
something
a direct
you can
line.
Understand,
it's like, okay, well, look around.
Yeah, something you can see, you can taste, you can touch, kind of, and you can recognize like, oh, hey. And this is the problem, is that there are so many actors out there that want you to think that the life you are living is bad. And that the only reason they want you to feel that way is so you will want to change the system you're living in. Now, sometimes, right? You do have actual problems and they do need actually solving. And liberalism isn't perfect by all means. There is suffering. There's no system that will get rid of your suffering. Like, there's certain problems that you have that are just always going to be with you. No system on earth has ever solved these things. There's always going to be poverty. There's always going to be illness. There's always going to be hardship. There's always going to be pain. There's always going to be injustice. Liberalism.
There's never going to be like true equality, right?
Yeah,
Like there's
there's
always
not
going
happening.
to be
Yeah.
right,
But
right. Inequality
liberalism
in the world.
Liberalism mitigates the negative effects of a lot of these things, and it allows for people to play the hand they're dealt in a way that is much more free than any other system on earth. It's as you said, it's a struggle to convince people because they have known nothing else. They have known nothing else their entire life. They have this entitlement, right? Like, I think that's the right word. This entitlement, like, I should have less problems. And they are encouraged to blame their problems on the system when a lot of times, and I hate to say this, gang, okay, brothers, this is to you fellas specifically, and I want you to look at me, okay? The reason you can't get a girlfriend is because you don't shower, you don't take care of yourself, and you suck at talking to women. It's not because of, the dating market or whatever. It's not because of all these outside extraneous factors beyond your control. Almost all these factors are in your control, unless you have, like, severe burns on your face or some shit, okay? Or you're handicapped in some way where you're like a paraplegic. But if you're ambulatory, if you're free, if you're just a normal looking dude, it's your fault. It's your fault. And people don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear it's their fault. But it is. Fix it. Fix yourself.
Oh yeah, you're right. Well, you're right. No, you're totally right. And that's the scourge of populism that is pervasive on the left of center and the right of center right now, which is, I sort of agree with you. It's a hard line to walk of like acknowledging that people are struggling, right? Like acknowledging the reality of the imperfections in our society, and also balancing that out with like people do often have a really warped understanding of what's of reality because of the media that they're consuming. And so it's like the push and pull of like trying to, and that sort of gets into what LP was saying in a discursive fashion, like sincerely listening to people describe their gripes and their frustrations, and their struggles, and also trying to also inject a little bit of reality of like put things on scale. I'm pausing because there's already like something contrary to that that's coming into my mind, which is like the people who I think are trying to ignore the murder on the train in North Carolina, and then the response to that is like, well, you can't, if you just ignore this, right? You let it fester, and people, even if it's happening way less than people think it is, like you sort of let this thing fester, and so I'm sympathetic to that also. But yeah, there, people on the left and the right want someone to blame for what they perceive to be their struggles in society, and people on the left have decided to blame white people, right? Colonialism and capitalism and the billionaires, right? And people on the right have decided to blame, well, immigrants
Jews.
and Black and brown people and Jews. Yeah. I only paused there because obviously, giant asterisk, not everybody on the right, obviously.
And not
also,
everyone, yeah,
plenty
again,
of
we're
people on
speaking,
the left are, yeah, and plenty of people on the left are blaming the Jews now too.
yeah,
Everyone's blaming the Jews.
we're,
They're just
we're
calling it
making
Zionist.
generalized statements, and
Yeah.
you're out here saying, well, I don't do that. Cool. You're one of the good ones, okay? Right? A lot of people are. A lot of people do. We're talking general trends here, okay? Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I don't know, it's hard, and there's almost something like there's always something like very back to basics about it. And again, it can sound condescending, and it's not enough without like, policy action and stuff, but like reminding people to like take count of the things that they're grateful for, right? Like that does seem to be a bit of a lost art, and just like having some perspective. And this goes like, it's along the lines of like the people on the far left who claim that we are like still today living in the most racist, sexist, whatever society on earth. And it's like, if you have any view of history, that's simply not true. And just really taking stock of like where we're at and how far we have progressed. Yeah, because I do that populist streak of like wanting someone else to blame for your struggle does seem really pervasive on the left and the right now, and that's
Populism
concerning
is
to me.
ascendant in our politics, and it's a curse. Populism is, unfortunately, like, I don't know if I would agree with our guest that lazy liberals are the greatest threat. Though I do feel like laziness in general, he was absolutely right in what he was saying. But I think that the resurgence of populism is the most immediate threat. How's that? It's the most immediate threat that we face. And populist left and populist right, they're all a problem. And I hope to convince people through my shows and through my arguments that liberalism is a better route to go down than populism is. But that'll be the course of many a days. Who we get next as a guest? Who do you wanna talk to next, or what do you want to talk about next week? What are you thinking? Okay.
Well, I really would like to talk to Drew Pavlo.
Think you can get him?
Dark liberalism. Yeah, I could definitely get him.
Get him. I have some words for him on him making content out of a 14-year-old kid. I have a bone to pick.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. But I just love to attach myself to controversial figures, apparently. But
is that why
really
you're on?
That's why I'm with Whick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
exactly.
is controversial about me? Anyway,
Whick.
go on, please. Sorry.
No, but I think I'm just very sympathetic to where Drew finds himself right now politically, and he's having a very public political evolution. And I think there's like two ways to interpret lazy liberals. The one is the way that we kind of focused on in this conversation, which is like the literal laziness, like being complacent and not wanting to do things, not wanting to make the argument, not wanting to go out there and fight or whatever. But there's also the like, just, I don't know the right word for it, but another version of the lazy liberal is just like the asleep at the wheel liberal. I don't know, not that we want them to get woke, but like the liberal just kind of like flapping in the wind, basically, and I think I see Drew as trying to pave a path similar to what my goals are, which is like be a dispositionally liberal person who wants to protect a liberal society that is multicultural and includes people like me and people like Drew, while also taking seriously, I think the issues on the left that have significantly contributed to the place we find ourselves in, and to polarization.
I am more than willing to have Drew on, but just so you know my opinion of Drew Pavlo, I don't think he's a serious actor. I think he's doing what he thinks is going to get him the most views and clicks. I think he's taking the positions he feels will be the most outlandish.
I don't agree.
Yeah, I don't view him as a serious actor. He's a memer. As our guest,
I think he's a memer.
He deals with memes. He memes, and that's what he does.
But I think he memes.
There's no substance, is what I'm saying.
I don't think that's true. That there's no substance.
Fair enough.
And maybe I've just like I've probably listened to him more than you. I would
maybe.
I'm sure I have. I think there is substance there. I think he memes because he recognizes the currency. Our cultural currency is memes, right? People were saying that in the chat earlier, and it's true. For all of our frustrations with memes, that is literally like how ideas are passed around in our modern society. But I do think he is trying to be serious. I think he's a little disjointed, a little ADHD, and all of these things. But so am I. So maybe that's why I relate to him. But I do think that he is making a sincere plea for a tough on crime, non-suicidal, like white guilt.
You know why he's going to be a good
Liberalism.
guest? Because you like him,
Why?
and I don't necessarily even dislike him.
Louis.
Again, I don't think he's a serious actor, and it would be good. It would be an interesting discussion as long as he's aware that you like him and I don't. As like we're not ambushing him, right? I'd love if you can get him on. He's an interesting fellow. I'll give him that.
Yeah, no, I think we should. Again, I see him as similar to me. Of like, the reason that I try to like wade in the waters of all of these cultural things in particular is because I feel like I want to see. I feel like there's only the crazies on both sides that are really having this fight out, and they just continue to dig their heels in. And so I do want I want liberally oriented people to take on the challenging cultural questions
Yes.
that we face head on. And I think that I see that as what he's doing. And yeah, so I would like to talk to him.
I guess, yeah. Get him on. We'll have him on next week.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that.
Yeah. That's your mission. What do we got coming up on this show the rest of the week? Well, I'll tell you, gang. I actually just booked something while we were having this show. They DM'd me, and I DM'd them back and things like that. Tomorrow, we're going to have on a few people, actually. We're going to have on the Gen Z lawyer. We're going to have on Baby Peaches. We're going to have on Majin. We're going to have on Curtis. And they're going to be talking about leftism. Has it ruined media? Has it ruined gaming? We've got some culture war stuff for you, gang. Then on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, okay? Thursday, let me get the guest list for you here. 1 second. I get a lot of DMs. Hold on. Okay, Thursday, we are having on Leftist Blondie, Anne. We're having on Corbin Sales. And they're going to be facing single-player Carl and Aiden Paladin. And they're going to be debating the trans gun ban. That should be fun. That should be great. It will be a fun discussion. Then, on Sunday, I'll be going on the Sitch and Adam show to talk about anti-white narratives in the media, anti-white bias in the mainstream media. Me and Sitch had a little bit of a Twitter disagreement about whether or not there was a conscious pressure to downplay or to cover up the story of the brutal murder of that poor Ukrainian refugee by the black train rider guy. I don't think that the mainstream media purposely covered it up. He disagrees. And so we're going to have a discussion about that on Sunday.
Love to be part of that conversation. But hey, you know.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll let you have your moment. But
we'll see. But it should be fun. That's what we got coming up. And check. And then on Monday, I'll be debating on is nationalism compatible with Christian ethics? I say it's not. And we're going to be debating that with some folks. It should be fun. Okay, that's what I got. What do you got coming up?
I've mentioned this to you. Oh, nothing to plug right now, but I've mentioned it to you before, but I would like one of our shows, maybe next week even, maybe I can try to get Drew for the week after, a call-in show where we just talk to the audience. People were really distracting me in chat today, so I would like some of these people to come up and chat with us. put a voice to
You
the
would
screen
be
name.
you would
I
be
think that would be a fun.
surprised at how many. No, I would love to do that at some point, right? But you would be surprised. They'll talk a lot of shit in chat, but they'll very rarely come into the Discord, right? It's rare that they'll come and actually
Well, that
chat
happened
with you.
last time. Jacob Hawley was talking a lot of shit. He said he was going to come up, and he never did. But he will, I'm sure, tune in next week and call in.
Well,
to
maybe
have a
not next week.
conversation.
Maybe not next. See when you can get Drew for. We'll see if he is even
Okay.
available next week. If he's not, we'll do the call-in show. If he is, we'll talk to him and then we'll do the call-in show the week after. But nothing to plug?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I debated some red pill / kind of Christian nationalist people last night on the Raging Tomato with the soy pill, so you guys can all check that
you
out
win?
if you'd like. I don't know. I told you at the beginning, I don't know that we won technically because our opponents basically defined sexism as having women's restrooms and men's restrooms because those restrooms discriminate on the basis of sex. Therefore, sexism is actually a good thing because we want to have separate restrooms. So, based on their definition, it made the whole thing really murky, but it was fun.
Yeah,
It's definitely
as long
fun.
as you had fun, I guess. And if you guys want to go see that, you can go check it out on Soy Pill or the Raging Tomato, one of those. Okay. Well, wave bye-bye to everyone because we're ending the show. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.